Brooklyn courtroom fell silent when an 8-year-old boy named Marcus Johnson stood up from his chair and asked permission to speak. He held a small folder filled with papers and notes, his determined eyes contrasting with his small frame before the entire court. "Your Honor, I would like to make a statement in defense of my grandmother," he said firmly, his young voice echoing through the quiet room. Judge William Carter stopped writing and looked over his glasses. In his 30-year career, he had never seen anything like this. At the jury table, some members exchanged uncertain glances, unsure if they should be impressed or uncomfortable. Dorothy Johnson, 72 years old, was accused of misappropriating funds from the Bedford-Stavent Neighborhood Housing Program. The missing amount was large, about $17,500, which had simply disappeared from the organization she had managed for 15 years. "Young man, you should be in school," said the judge with a half-smile, trying to be kind in such an unusual situation. "I know, sir," Marcus replied, "but my grandmother has heart problems and can't get upset. Her lawyer dropped the case yesterday because he found out he wasn't getting paid." His voice carried a calm maturity that disturbed everyone in the room. A low murmur spread across the courtroom. David Richardson, the prosecutor in charge, rolled his eyes with irritation. He was an elegant man in his 50s, known for a 95% conviction rate in financial fraud cases. "Your Honor, this is completely irregular. A child cannot represent anyone in court," Richardson protested, adjusting his expensive tie with visible annoyance. "I don't want to represent anyone, sir," Marcus answered politely. "I just want to tell the truth. My grandmother always taught me that the truth wins, even when it seems impossible." Judge Carter leaned forward, intrigued. There was something about the boy's courage that touched him deeply. But he was also aware that the courtroom was watching a young black child trying to face a system that had never been fair to people like him. "Very well, Marcus. You have 5 minutes to speak, but only as a witness," the judge said, ignoring Richardson's silent protest. Marcus took a deep breath and opened his folder. The papers were neatly organized, filled with newspaper clippings, copies of documents, and even drawings he made to explain his points. "Your Honor, I've lived with my grandmother since my parents died in an accident 2 years ago. She has always managed the housing program, and I helped her check the bills every Sunday night at the kitchen table," he said. Richardson looked ready to interrupt, but something in Marcus's determined eyes made him hesitate. It was like this child knew exactly what he was doing. "Every Sunday, Grandma Dorothy would spread the papers out and let me sort the receipts by color. Blue for expenses, yellow for income. It was our special time together," Marcus continued, his voice trembling slightly before regaining control. As everyone in the courtroom watched, Marcus carried himself with quiet confidence. His calm eyes revealed something much deeper than desperation. They showed the strength of someone who had already survived storms greater than most adults could imagine. If this story of determination and injustice touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe to the channel to see how an 8-year-old boy turned a courtroom full of prejudice into a fight for the most unexpected justice Brooklyn had ever seen. Richardson couldn't hide his contempt. To him, this was nothing but emotional theater, a black child trying to save a guilty old woman with pity instead of facts. In September, 3 weeks before the money went missing, Grandma Dorothy noticed that someone was using her housing program account without permission, Marcus continued, holding up a plain school notebook. "She wrote everything down right here." The prosecutor stood abruptly. "Your Honor, this is ridiculous. We're wasting time with the fantasies of a child clearly coached by the defendant." "Mr. Richardson, you can speak later if you wish," Marcus said politely. "My grandmother always taught me to let people finish speaking." The truth, however, was more complicated than anyone imagined. Dorothy Johnson had spent 15 years helping low-income families find decent housing in Brooklyn. She worked without pay, driven by the belief that every child deserved a safe home. 2 years ago, after Marcus lost his parents in a car accident, Dorothy took him in without hesitation. The boy arrived broken, blaming himself for his parents' deaths. They had been on their way home from his school play when a drunk driver hit them. For months, Marcus refused to speak. Dorothy spent sleepless nights beside him, reading aloud court cases and legal documents from her volunteer work helping neighbors with paperwork. "My little grandson," she would say, "knowledge is the only thing no one can take away from us. When you understand how the world works, you'll never feel small again." Those words changed Marcus. He started asking questions about legal terms and procedures, showing an incredible memory and natural understanding of the law that impressed even Dorothy's lawyer friends. "Your Honor, may I show you what we found?" Marcus asked, snapping everyone back to the present. "This is a circus," Richardson muttered. "What credibility can a child have in financial matters?" "More than you think," Marcus replied firmly. "Especially when that child learned to read legal documents at age 6 just to connect with his grandmother after losing his parents." The room went quiet. Even Richardson seemed caught off guard by the boy's confidence. Marcus stepped forward, holding up a photograph. On September 12th, $2,500 was withdrawn for emergency roof repairs at the community center. But my grandmother took me there the next day, and the roof was fine. He showed the photo, dated September 13th. "See? No new repairs." Richardson shifted uncomfortably. He had built his case on Dorothy's technical role, but had never double-checked the transactions himself. Then on September 18th, Marcus continued, another $1,800 supposedly went to new security equipment. But there was none. And on September 25th, $3,200 for outside legal counsel. But Grandma never hired any lawyers. She always handled legal issues herself with help from friends who worked for free. The jury leaned forward, now fully engaged. What started as a curiosity was turning serious. "Mr. Richardson," Marcus said, "did you confirm that these companies actually exist?" The prosecutor froze. It was a simple question, but he hadn't done that. "The investigation focused on the administrator's responsibility," he said defensively. "I see," Marcus replied calmly. "So you assumed my grandmother was guilty without checking who really stole the money?" Each of Marcus's questions revealed holes in the prosecutor's case. Richardson realized too late that he had built his argument on prejudice instead of facts, but Marcus wasn't just lucky. For months, he had studied every detail, driven by love for his grandmother and the belief that the system would try to destroy another innocent black family. Every piece of evidence he revealed carried quiet power. "And there's something strange about these signatures," Marcus added, pulling another envelope from his folder. "They're all signed by Grandma Dorothy, but she never signed them." He laid out several sheets comparing signatures. "I learned handwriting analysis at the library. Even I can tell these are different. Grandma's real signature is softer. These are written with heavy pressure." Richardson rolled his eyes. "We're accepting handwriting analysis from a child now? That's absurd." "Mr. Richardson," Marcus replied politely, "do you have any professional handwriting analysis to prove these are real?" The prosecutor hesitated. He didn't. "This was another basic check you didn't do," Marcus said calmly. "So you have no proof that Grandma Dorothy actually signed these documents." Richardson struggled to find words. But the boy continued with the same quiet confidence that had stunned the courtroom. For 2 months, since learning about the charges, Marcus had turned every night into a study session. But he wasn't doing it alone. Mrs. Patricia Williams, a retired librarian and former paralegal, had secretly become his mentor. Patricia had worked in law offices for 30 years and immediately saw something special in the boy when he walked into the library, asking for books on legal procedures. "Marcus," she had told him 2 weeks earlier, "you have a brilliant legal mind, but we have to be strategic. They'll try to disqualify you because you're a child. You have to stay 3 steps ahead." Together, they planned everything. Patricia taught him how to organize evidence, ask questions that expose weaknesses, and most importantly, remain calm when facing arrogant opponents. "But the most important discovery is right here," Marcus said, pulling out a printed document. "This is a report from the bank showing that on the day the money disappeared, someone called the account at 2:30 p.m. The call lasted 15 minutes. He held up another paper. "And this is a medical record from Brooklyn Methodist Hospital showing that at that exact time, Grandma Dorothy was with me in the emergency room. I was having an asthma attack and she stayed there with me from 1 to 5 p.m. A wave of murmurs spread through the room. It was the first solid proof that Dorothy couldn't have made the transaction. Richardson stood nervously. "Your Honor, These documents weren't presented during discovery. Dr. Richardson, Marcus replied, did you present any evidence proving my grandmother was even there when the money was taken? The courtroom fell silent again. Richardson had built his entire case on Dorothy's technical role without checking if she was physically present. Also, Marcus continued, did you check the security cameras in the building where the housing office is located? The cameras weren't working that day, Richardson muttered. Interesting, Marcus said with calm precision. Because I called the security company last week. They told me the cameras were working perfectly. They even offered to send me the recordings for free to help Grandma Dorothy. The room erupted in shock. Richardson realized an 8-year-old had done the investigative work his own team had ignored. How did you even get this information? Richardson demanded, his voice shaking. It's simple, Marcus said softly. When you love someone, you do whatever it takes to protect them. I've spent the last 2 months studying this case after school every single day. Dorothy, who had stayed silent the entire time, began to cry quietly. Her grandson was defending her with courage she never thought possible. Judge Carter leaned forward, visibly impressed. Marcus, how did you learn to organize evidence like this? Mrs. Patricia from the library helped me, Marcus said. She worked in law offices for 30 years. She told me everyone deserves a fair defense, even when they can't afford one. Richardson's face turned pale. He had underestimated them completely. This wasn't a desperate child. It was a brilliant team that had investigated the case more thoroughly than his entire staff. But I have one last piece of evidence, Marcus said, his tone shifting. The most important one of all. He took out a sealed envelope. Inside this envelope is proof of who really stole the money. Grandma Dorothy and I discovered the truth, but we wanted to give the real culprit a chance to confess first. Then Marcus looked directly at Richardson. Doctor, would you like to withdraw the charges before I open this? Richardson hesitated. His entire career was built on pride and conviction, but now, facing an 8-year-old holding an envelope that could destroy him, he froze. Everyone in the courtroom could sense something historic was about to happen. Marcus's small hands trembled, not from fear, but from the power of truth about to be revealed. I can't drop charges based on blackmail from a child, Richardson stammered, beads of sweat forming on his forehead. Marcus calmly opened the envelope and took out a digital recorder. Dr. Richardson, do you remember this phone call from September 15th? He pressed play. Richardson's own voice filled the room. Tony, I need you to speed up this case with the old woman on welfare. It doesn't matter if she's guilty or not. My conviction rate can't drop before the Attorney General's election. A deafening silence filled the courtroom. Then another man's voice replied on the recording. Rick, are you sure? What if they find out we didn't investigate properly? Who's going to find out? Richardson's voice answered. It's a poor old black woman against me. The jury's already decided before they even walk in. Gasps spread through the room. The jurors' faces twisted in shock and disgust. Richardson's entire career had just collapsed in front of them. This is inadmissible, he shouted. That recording was obtained illegally. Actually, it wasn't, Marcus said calmly. Mrs. Patricia taught me about recording laws. That call was made from a public office phone, which has clear notices saying all calls are recorded for transparency. Judge Carter's expression hardened. In 30 years, he had never witnessed such blatant misconduct. Marcus continued. Dr. Richardson, do you also remember this message you sent to Tony 3 days later? He held up a printed text message. The investigation needs to focus only on the administrator's responsibility. I don't want detectives wasting time checking companies or signatures. Case closed in 2 weeks maximum. Outrage rippled through the courtroom. Jurors exchanged disgusted looks. Richardson's actions weren't just careless. They were criminal. But the most important evidence, Marcus said, holding up one last document, is right here. He displayed a bank statement. This is Dr. Richardson's personal account. On October 2nd, 3 days after Grandma Dorothy was charged, he received a deposit of $25,000 from a shell company. Richardson tried to speak, but his voice cracked. That, Marcus added, is the same company that received the fraudulent payments from the housing program. You weren't neglecting the investigation, Doctor. You were protecting your partners. The courtroom exploded in murmurs. Richardson's arrogance had destroyed him. Not only had he accused an innocent woman, but he was part of the very corruption he claimed to fight. "Mrs. Patricia taught me something important," Marcus said, turning to face him. "She said people like you always make the same mistake. You think you can step on those you see as weak and never face consequences?" Dorothy slowly stood up, her voice steady. "Dr. Richardson, for 15 years I've dedicated my life to helping families find homes. You tried to destroy that for money and politics." Richardson hung his head. His career, reputation, and ambitions were gone. Crushed by an 8-year-old boy he had mocked. "Marcus," Judge Carter said, his voice trembling with emotion, "in all my years on the bench, I have never seen a presentation of evidence as complete as yours." "Thank you, Your Honor," Marcus replied softly. "I just wanted to clear Grandma Dorothy's name and make sure justice was served." The judge turned to the prosecutor. "Mr. Richardson, the charges against Dorothy Johnson are dismissed immediately. And I am referring this case for investigation into prosecutorial misconduct and corruption." Richardson tried to protest, but stumbled. The arrogance that once defined him had turned into pure panic. He finally realized that not only had he lost the case, he was about to lose everything. "Your Honor," Marcus said, "I want everyone to know I didn't do this out of revenge. I did it for the love of Grandma Dorothy, and because every child deserves to see that justice is possible, even when it seems impossible." The courtroom erupted in applause. Several jurors had tears in their eyes, not only for Dorothy's proven innocence, but for the powerful reminder that intelligence and determination can overcome privilege and corruption. As the applause echoed through the courtroom and Richardson was escorted out by security, one question remained. Could it be that this 8-year-old boy had planted seeds of change that would grow far beyond those 4 walls, transforming not only his life but inspiring an entire generation to believe that age, color, or background never define the size of our dreams? 6 months after the trial that changed Brooklyn, Marcus was sitting in the front row of the city's law school, not as a student, but as a guest speaker. At age 9, he had become the most famous civil procedure case study of the past decade. True justice, Marcus told an audience of 300 future lawyers, doesn't happen when you defeat someone. It happens when you protect those you love and teach others to do the same. In the front row, Dorothy smiled proudly. Her health had improved dramatically since the stress of the charges ended. The housing program, now under transparent management, had received record donations from people inspired by the Johnson family's story of integrity. Richardson, on the other hand, faced a very different reality. After a federal investigation, he was convicted of corruption, prosecutorial misconduct, and fraud. He lost his law license, served 2 years in prison, and now worked as an insurance salesman in a small town where no one knew his past. "People ask me if I feel sorry for Dr. Richardson," Marcus said during the lecture. "I do feel sorry for him. Sorry for someone who had so much privilege and used it to hurt innocent people." Mrs. Patricia, now officially Marcus's mentor through a university program, was in the audience. Together, they had created a project teaching children from underserved communities about their basic legal rights. The Marcus Project now operated in 25 Brooklyn public schools, teaching hundreds of children that they had a voice and power. "Marcus taught us something fundamental," said the college dean during the presentation. "Knowledge without character is dangerous, but character with knowledge can change the world." Marcus's life had been completely transformed. 3 major law firms had already offered him full scholarships for college. The national media covered his story, but Dorothy always shielded her grandson from too much attention, making sure he stayed a normal child. The case inspired major legislative change. A bill known as the Marcus Law was passed in New York State, requiring prosecutors to present solid evidence of the defendant's physical presence at the scene in grand larceny cases. Other states soon considered similar laws. At the end of the lecture, a student raised her hand. "Marcus, are you going to be a lawyer when you grow up?" "I don't know yet," he replied honestly. "But I know I want to help people understand they have more power than they realize." Dorothy, now honored as Brooklyn Citizen of the Year, used her new platform to push for welfare reforms. She was invited to join a city council overseeing social programs, ensuring transparency and efficiency. My grandson taught me that age does not define wisdom, she said on national TV, and color does not define ability. Sometimes justice just needs to be reminded of its own principles. Richardson tried several times to contact Dorothy to apologize, even sending letters from prison. She refused all contact, and not out of hate, but because she had moved on to greater things. Some wounds, she told Marcus one day, don't need forgiveness to heal. They need justice, and we got justice. In the courtroom where it all began, Judge Carter framed a photo from the day of the trial and kept it on his desk as a reminder that real justice can come from the most unexpected places. He became more rigorous with prosecutors, often citing the Johnson case as an example of true due process. Marcus remained a normal child, playing basketball, watching cartoons, and getting into harmless trouble like any 9-year-old. But he carried a wisdom about justice and determination that impressed adults across the nation. The Bedford-Stuyvesant community had been transformed. The housing program became a national model, and Dorothy was invited to consult in other cities. Marcus often accompanied her, carrying his famous organized binder, now recognized by lawyers and students alike. During one of these trips, a reporter asked Marcus what his biggest lesson was. I learned that when you're right and don't give up, the system can be fair, but you have to be ready to prove you're right. Mrs. Patricia, watching him speak with maturity, later said, "This boy didn't just save his grandmother. He restored my faith that the next generation can fix what ours broke." The Johnson case became a precedent. Lawyers began citing it in procedural misconduct trials, and law schools added it to their ethics courses. The difference between being a victim and being a winner, Marcus often said, isn't what happens to you, but what you do next. Grandma Dorothy taught me that knowledge is power, but love is courage. Richardson tried to destroy an innocent family, but ended up destroying only himself. Marcus and Dorothy came out stronger, inspiring a generation of kids to believe their voices matter. The Johnson family's story proved that age doesn't define ability. Color doesn't limit potential. And when love meets knowledge, miracles can happen even in the unlikeliest places. Marcus had planted seeds of change that grew far beyond that courtroom, transforming lives and inspiring faith in justice. If this story of justice and perseverance touched your heart, subscribe to the channel for more true stories that prove the best revenge isn't destroying those who hurt you. It's building something so great they could never imagine. What about you? Have you ever fought for someone you love against a system that felt impossible to beat? Share your story in the comments, because as Marcus showed us, every person, young or old, has more power than they realize when they decide justice is worth fighting for. Sometimes real revolution doesn't come with shouting or violence, but with an 8-year-old boy, an organized folder, and the unshakable belief that truth and love always win in the end.